Hello, my name is Gabby. My background is Touch for Health, and I'm also a professional PKP kinesiologist and member of faculty in New Zealand. And today I'd like to talk to you about embracing change. I'm going to approach this in a completely different way. I've had 13 years working with inmates in a maximum security prison between the years of 2006 and 2019. I went in to satisfy a personal need to provide a little light and healing into the lives of lost souls in prison. I believed kinesiology would provide the answer to all of their problems, and in some ways this was true, but it was I who learnt most about the human condition. I had absolutely no idea how I was going to begin, so I started with a group of 10 men, and I worked on one person at a time, my one man, and I surrogated in all of the other members of the group. Then at home, I would write a paper to help the man with the issue and photocopied for a series for all of the members of the class. I didn't know what to do next, so every week it was different. I experimented at every turn. But interestingly, eventually I realized that I'd revealed the 5 universal stresses that all of the men in prison seem to suffer from. Lack of concentration and focus, low energy, insomnia, depression, and anger. But I also noticed that the inmates themselves were often very reluctant to speak out and to admit to what they had done. They trusted no one and they had no self-esteem. Just as a pointer, Dr. Viktor Frankl's findings in the Auschwitz concentration camp during the last World War concurred with my findings, which was quite interesting that people suffer from these conditions when they are incarcerated and their freedom has been curtailed. So there are the 5 universal stresses. Entering prison for the first time was a very terrifying experience for the inmates. A few of the men were still traumatized, in fact. So they trust no one, they have no self-esteem. So how does a mere kinesiologist deal with the deepest trauma in a class situation? How does one begin? Well, I had a very happy accident in asking my men to write their life story on day 1, plus a page or two about their crime story and how they arrived in prison. For me, it was to understand their circumstances a little better and to give them the opportunity to speak and to unpack their story privately without making it public. For them, it was the first step in expressing themselves with no judgment or criticism from me or anyone else. There was literally no comment made. It was as it was, and it went on file. They probably knew that I would read it eventually, or at home or before writing their report. But this of itself was a giant step forward into acknowledging the change. It's very hard to change your circumstances until you've told your story, or once your story becomes clear within yourself as to what happened, why it happened, how you felt then and how you feel now. What were you thinking? And where did those thoughts, beliefs, and perceptions come from? Once this clarity filters in, you can begin to question what you want to change or upgrade and why. Only then will you be able to resonate with the desire and to allow it to flow into reality in an authentic, unforced way. This is called personal growth, the best kind of change. and I discovered this was my calling in prison, simply to be a facilitator, for change. So this is a man expressing himself in his own life story. My life has been filled with moments of soaring hope and moments of overwhelming despair, with times of great joy and times of great sorrow, and with periods full of love and periods of crushing heartbreak. It really is enough to break one's heart. This man was totally depressed, or had been for months. He did my course, joined in the other activities, plus a Muslim group where he found his place. His story became one of total transformation. He was always on top of the world, organizing, teaching, and fully participating in prison life. Through acceptance of his circumstances, he embarked upon a journey of personal growth that was an inspiration to all. Bouncing in and teaching kinesiology techniques to a new intake of prisoners was not possible until they felt slightly more receptive to the changes they had to make, first and foremost in adapting to a foreign environment. Over time, and as I gathered a deeper understanding of their situation, I was able to formulate a paper on acceptance and change, a basic life skill so lacking in prison. Although this paper was written for my prison students, it also contains universal truths that can be applied to everyone. The following are some ideas and steps I shared with them. It is possible for your personal development to feel and work through strong emotion and to face the consequences of your actions. You feel each emotion without judgment. Just experience them as they are. Be patient with yourself. Life always seems to offer direction that is positive for personal growth. Sometimes we get what we need, not necessarily what we want. Everyone has free choice regarding their own reaction or appropriate response, both in thought and behavior. Gratitude for all you have is a great leveler. Life is our greatest teacher, filled with potential for learning and personal growth. This usually embraces change. The fundamental law of duality. There is a positive and a negative in everything. It is neither good nor bad, but holds infinite potential. It is your own choice to change your perception, to become responsible for your own thoughts and actions, and lastly, to have an acceptance of who you are. Most of the prisoners claimed these as an elixir and tried to include some of these points in their everyday life. Inmates trust no one, so the next step was to make them feel secure within themselves and able to cope. At this point, no man had any self-esteem to speak of, and this relates to not feeling secure. So what is your definition of security? The dictionary says secure condition or feeling, thing that guards or guarantees safety of state or company against espionage, theft, etc. Security is in the eye of the beholder. Depending upon where you are and the circumstances in which you find yourself, if you're a car guard, for instance, in a parking lot, your job security would be in ensuring cars are not stolen. At home, families immediately think about peripheral protection for their physical safety. Are the doors locked? Have we put the alarm on, etc.? Owning a business, physical safety precautions come into play, but addition, one worries about fraud, embezzlement, and financial loss. Prisoners at Leeuwkop have incredible insecurities about their future and worry about it, unbelievably so. And often workers are unhappy and insecure in their positions at work. Many women marry for financial or emotional support. And we all know that insecurity results in health issues because of stress. Political events cause insecurities as our lives are thrown into turmoil and change, and global events create fear, stress, and insecurities. So we have the stock exchange and recessions and COVID. World has wars, floods, earthquakes, sandstorms, accidents, illness, tragedies. Life happens, and we have no control over many of the events. Real security is not something that we can bank or create externally. Insecurity is a state of mind that is fear-driven. The author Stephen Covey talks about the 90-10 principle. 10% depends upon what happens to you, and 90% of life is decided upon by how you react. COVID-19 provides us with a great example of change and adaptation. And I absolutely concur with Covey's statement, we really have no control over 10% of what happens to us. But the other 90% is different. You determine your own reaction. We come to trust. Often day-to-day stress is triggered by fear and mostly the lack of trust within ourselves. And this relates to the mental what-if scenario. We can be thrown into panic, emotional disarray, and imbalance simply by listening to horror stories other people tell us or imagining similar unedited stories within our own heads. What is the answer? The only genuine stability and security is locked deep within the self. We all need to find our center, our anchor, and also listen to our mental internal chatter. In truth, the only guaranteed security we have lies within. Our mental imaginings are our greatest fear. If that happened, I would die, or I would never cope. These are sweeping statements, and you really do not know the truth until the time comes. Adversity often brings out the best in people when they step up to the plate and become heroes to many. For instance, I had a young 17-year-old client who managed to control a robbery undertaken by 5 men. Whilst talking them through the situation, she protected her 7 classmates. In reality, one finds one's own inner resources that up until that time were unknown and were untapped. One should never underestimate the strength of one's inner spirit that surfaces in times of difficulty and struggle. But what about trust in your ability to shine at whatever you wish to achieve in life? I suggest you Google Hein Wagner, a blind man with a vision, to see what trust in one's own abilities really means. His perception of his limitations really did not exist. He had a most incredible story, and he's a South African. His story. As a child, he not only learned to ride a bicycle, but to participate within his sighted friendship group. He had to join in the games they played if he wanted to be part of the team. This included high-speed competitions. He achieved this by listening to the clicks he heard from the bikes the sighted people rode, rather like a bat. He learned to master a computer and went on to specialize in IT. He started huge businesses. He rode across the Atlantic. He broke the land speed record for blind people. He sailed across the world with one deaf and another blind man as his crew. He cycled the Cape Epic, one of the most difficult 8-day mountain cycle races in the world. This he did on tandem with a sighted person. Whenever he achieved what he set out to do, his next question was to ask, "What's next?" Fear became his best friend, and as a result, change flowed easily. But what about trust in your ability to shine at whatever you wish to achieve in life? It is us who limit ourselves through misperception and lack of trust. The mind causes most of our inner conflict. This is a story from prison about a young man named Fuzzy. In those days, the students had to hand in their manual on completion of their course. My facilitators were livid, and when I entered the room, the tension was electric. I told everyone to give Fuzzy a chance to speak. He was young, angry, and fairly volatile at this point, but I was prepared to listen to what he had to say. He explained that he needed the file to refer to, without which he would not be able to remember the techniques and correction points. Fair comment. When he was finished, I had a chance to speak. I told him my situation about reprinting everything, and it was getting too expensive for me to continue. His whole demeanor changed instantly. He said, "So you mean you come here to help us and you do not get paid for it?" I could see the tears in his eyes as he held out his arms to embrace me. This was an open heart moment. We became friends, Fuzzy and I. One day we met up again. He needed to talk to me as he was terrified of leaving prison. He had nowhere to go. I asked him if he had a homeboy or a friend he could write to. His grandparents could neither read nor write. Apparently he continued waiting in the passageway of the prison to see if I would come over the next few days. And to cut a long story short, a letter was read to the grandparents, who said they would take him in with open arms and would try to get him a job. Again, he patiently waited for days for me. On my next visit, he told me that I had saved his life and he would like to give me a gift. He went on to say he had nothing to give me, so he would pray for me and my family. I told him it was the most meaningful gift he could ever have thought of, and I would be honored to receive it. A gift of pure love. What a beautiful ending to a story of sadness and terror. I love the words of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talking about love. She says, "To open our hearts again, we must be open to seeing differently. When we close our hearts, when we are intolerant, it is often because we don't know what is going on with the other person. We don't understand them. We don't know why they don't return our calls or why they are so loud, so we don't love them. We are so ready to talk about our hurt, our pain, and how we have been wronged. The truth is, we betray one another by not freely giving our smiles, our understanding, our love. We withhold the greatest gift that God has given us. Our act of withholding is much more serious than what the other person might have or might not have done to us." I suggested to my students that we should start a revolution of healing, which actually turned out to be a revelation of healing. There are so many incredible stories of a 360-degree turnaround in healing, but here are a few that I'd like to share. One of my students was the leader of the infamous 28 gang. He had a wide, square jaw and was a leader through and through. He became one of my facilitators, and began to teach the students himself. And I loved his analogy for depression. He likened it to a soccer ball. He said depression is when the ball has lost all of its air. So when you kick, it just flips over and does not travel far. Recovery from depression means you blow a little air into the ball every day and through working on yourself. And when you kick it, it flies wherever you want it to go. He was sadly transferred, but I was phoned a few months later by a social worker from his next prison. She asked if I'd like to be involved in a project to bring orphans to the prison so my guy could mentor them in order to prevent them from ending up in prison as he had. It was all his idea. Another one, using the neurolymphatic wheel and the neurovascular wheel proved to be profound. One very toxic man vomited after doing neurolymphatics on himself, as did another student on drugs. But this time it was after doing figure of eights. So put this simple combination of techniques together, and the results were out of this world. Sam, not his real name, was a paraplegic. One could hear him coming down the passage, clickety-click, clickety-click, swinging himself along between two crutches. I had no idea how I was going to teach him muscle testing, but we made a plan. When it came to neurovascular points, he terrified himself when his lame leg started to twitch. I told him to keep going as a nerve connection had been made, and this was fantastic news. Sam loved kinesiology and attended every course and became my translator. 6 months went by, and another man at the prison asked me if I knew that Sam could walk. What? He always came to the class half an hour early so that we could speak of spiritual matters. He was a very profound man in his own way. Anyway, during one of these quiet times, I asked him about this walking and for him to show me. His face broadened into the hugest smile imaginable as he cast his crutches aside and walked the length of the room and back like a little tin man. He had been doing neurovascular points as well as moving his legs in figure of eights in the bath twice a day for 6 long months. What an achievement! Even his physiotherapist wanted to know how he had achieved this success. And the last story I'd like to share with you is of a man called Dan, also not his real name. He was angry, unapproachable, and lived on his own in a single cell. He attended my course and did all the required homework. And one morning, he stood up, all out of the blue, came to the front of the class and said, "It's time for me to speak out." And this is a brief outline of his story. "I have not uttered a word about this for 20 years, but now it is time. I lied about my age and I was 16 when I applied to go to join the army. For 6 weeks, I was trained as a killing machine and was then sent to the front line. I was caught by the enemy and tortured for 2 days without food or water. On the first day, my feet were continuously whipped with a branch as I lay on my stomach, hands bound with feet upturned from bent knees. Throughout the torture, he refused to give information regarding his colleagues. So the enemy placed burning branches under his arms and pressed them down to maximize the burn damage. Still he refused to talk, became unconscious, and was left for dead. He was found by his colleagues and flown back home, and this is where his second nightmare began, because now he was regarded as damaged goods and useless as a soldier. He was discharged without any counseling or psychological attention. Dan returned to everyday life, a broken man. He took drugs and suffered from PTSD. The only job he could find was as a bouncer in a nightclub. And one night, a fight broke out. Dan lost it and killed a man, and he is now in prison for life. While standing in front of the class, Dan stripped off his prison suit to the waist to show us the scars he bore. 2 great circles of mutilated skin from under his arms down to the waist were revealed. He told us he hadn't been sleeping because the second he closed his eyes, he had terrifying nightmares which explains his angry disposition. But then came Dan's happy ending to the story. He revealed that without telling anyone, every day he'd been practicing his kinesiology exercises that he learned in class. He used mainly the neuro-emotional points and neurovascular points. After only 4 days, he was able to give up after 4 days, he was able to give up smoking and now sleeps like a baby. With his sleep restored, he has returned to his long lost, cheerful self. To keep the classes alive and fresh, I kept thinking about how I could make them a little bit different. If I went to the coast, I'd bring back seashells and packets of sea sand. The shells were another story. I brought mussel shells and wondered why they were the most popular. It later dawned on me that they could be sharpened and used as a weapon. Each spring, I took a packet of colourful spring flowers to class. I love the symbolism of renewal and starting again, and the prison environment is all the inmates see. There are no trees, there's no grass, no flowers, in fact no life outside of the inmates themselves. I wish I had a camera to take photos of these hardened criminals, studying the beauty and the formation of the flower and savouring the fragrance of the blossom. I love watching them become emotionally moved by beauty and softening into the person that their loved ones know. At class end, all of them took their flower, and I noticed the remaining flowers were also taken. One young inmate, who had perpetrated particularly evil deeds, decorated his own cap with flowers, which I thought very sweet. For him, this day was different. He was given the opportunity to quietly observe nature in its purest form, probably for the first time in his life, judging from his background. He could tangibly understand beauty, goodness, and God's work. Such a realization can often change a man forever. These people have deeply wounded spirits, but they have hearts that can be touched when treated with love and respect. Often it is like watching the dead come back to life. Some individuals have dull, lifeless eyes that just stare out of an expressionless face. One man told me in his homework that he had written to his family and it said, "I talk and have a bright face." His family would have understood. I was deeply moved by this as it demonstrated a significant and positive change. His light had returned. There were enormous changes in many of the men, and I have thousands of testimonials of the changes that the inmates experienced. So I'm going to share one now. I find myself incarcerated because I failed to handle my anger and stress. This course has not only assisted me in dealing effectively with stress, but has also offered me an opportunity to conduct an intensive introspection, asking myself why certain things had gone wrong with my life, why I made certain decisions and choices. It has helped to boost my self-esteem and my self-worth, allowing me to arise from the ashes like the proverbial phoenix and to soar the vast recesses of my mind, enabling me to become the best that I can be and to realize my full potential. It has also, and most importantly, helped me to find that quiet place within myself where I can go to find the tranquility that I desire. Coming to the end of the course was heartbreaking. Taking the inmates through the stress-relieving kinesiology course was, as it happened, not quite enough. I had to add some life skills as well. I believe wholeheartedly that these skills are a lifesaver to these men. Many of the inmates I've met would never have crossed the path of crime had they been educated in life skills, basic values, morals, discipline, and integrity. These men kept me on my toes, and I had to keep up with writing papers to keep up with their needs. One said, "We are forgotten, and you give us hope and a better knowledge and understanding of ourselves. In prison circumstances, it's difficult to think of the niceties of life when you are surviving. Life does not shine easily in prison circumstances. Anger is rife, and one is happy to argue silly small stuff. Therefore, to get anywhere with these people, you first need to address stress. And this is where kinesiology and life skills come in, and in such a profound way. But there are many different paths as well. After a lot of personal introspection, I have come to realize a lot about the components of change and what requirements are necessary to maintain a mindset that allows a natural flow and or acceptance into change and the unexpected. It's not necessarily from a business perspective of how to make more or bigger or faster. It is the fundamental ability to raise your own level of consciousness. If you can do that, the pieces will fall into place. So in conclusion, what are these tools? So to work on yourself daily, to be grateful for what you have, to live in the present moment, to take appropriate measures in safety practice, change what you can change and work on accepting what cannot be changed. Practice stress-releasing techniques on a daily basis and resolve stress as it happens, either on your own if you are able, or seek professional help. And finally, what is the security in embracing change, other than to have trust and faith in a higher power? I believe it is to have an inner knowing and confidence that you have the ability to rise to every occasion, to trust yourself to draw upon your own inner resources to overcome the demand of the moment, to trust and listen to your own inner voice as your guide to making the best possible decisions for now in life and in business. Children are wired for change and learning. As we grow into adulthood, our perceptions, judgment, and attitudes block this creativity. So be curious and open-minded about all things new. So finally, what is security in embracing change? It's to learn to rely upon yourself as your own best friend and to discover and know who you are. This is the ultimate security. Thank you.